I feel like every time I do this, there's like one thing that just doesn't go, like one platform that I totally miss. Okay, YouTube seems to be live. X is live. Let's see if LinkedIn comes through. Should. How are you guys doing?
Not too bad.
Sotiris, I notice a pure t-shirt, so I'm sensing there's a either the continuing or renewed interest in fitness, in weightlifting and everything. Tell us how much are you doing now?
Uh, Not as much as I probably should be doing, but just gym, swimming, hill, like walking up a hill with my dog. Um,
Nice.
Also nursing a herniated disc, so I'm having to mix up my routine a little bit.
That's good.
But we should go on a hike soon.
We absolutely should. And also going to weightlifting. I still think about you sometimes when I weightlifting because you're the first guy who taught me about, I had never done a deadlift until you taught me how to do a deadlift.
Yeah,
So, which
nice.
is why I'm so handicapped now because, it just totally destroyed me. But anyway,
Well, same as it turns out.
yeah, exactly. Um, Guys, I feel like there's so much. I we talked right after the liquidation event, and I'm
Mm.
just curious, Tom, what do you think about markets, maybe like in general, after this whole period? Because I feel like we're almost in a consolidation or stagnation period, and then you have like little whips up and down based on good news and bad news. Do you have a view on what kind of market we're in?
I do, I think. So if I had to guess, this looks very much like accumulation to me. Um, I, I'm still, I think probably, I'm still pretty bullish. I think that we're pretty range bound what we're trying to break out. That's what I generally read prior to any sort of big releases or big macro announcements. You can see markets react. We did see that yesterday as well. Quite interestingly, initially we got the rate cut, which markets were a bit spooked about, right? And then that got confirmed. So that was a slight, ever so slight positive response. That was then followed by risk off, which was essentially driven by Powell's remarks on the December rate cut not being baked in 100% just yet. And that obviously wasn't in line with what markets had priced in. So we've seen a little bit of risk off. And I think that's sort of the dance that we're in. We'll probably see that rate cut. I'm fairly confident on that as well. It will just take a bit of time. We were flying not necessarily blind, according to his remarks. So he's got some data during the government shutdown that would sort of still help him to pivot the strategy in case there was, but he also has to say that. But apparently on in terms of labor data, they're getting state level data that's still being produced. But there's, yes, that doesn't necessarily help. What I am seeing, and you guys are probably seeing as well, is equities being on an absolute tear, earnings coming out, really, really nicely. So my question to you guys is, what's not to like? We've got QT that's going to be discontinued on December 1st, and then we're back to QE. And I think, yeah, what's not to like, guys?
Yeah. I can't help but think like very often about this one lady that I had seen on YouTube, but it was years back, like pre-COVID, where I think people were always afraid about the exuberance, of stocks, and people were saying we're due for a pullback. And she was kind of reminding, look, the earnings are positive, and rates are accommodative. We've never seen a pullback, in that type of environment ever, like a recession in those types of environment. And I feel like, what I think one of our favorite meme for this group is, the bell curve, but between the retarded, the genius in the middle of the curve. And I feel like the simplicity of her explanation was exactly that. It's like the rate cuts are in, earnings are good, the economy is stable. There's a lot of things, of course, that people can worry about, but not enough that it would necessarily destabilize risk assets to the point where we pull back. Of course, not 10%, because that can always happen. Maybe even 15 or 20%, which, for a lot of people would be cataclysmic. But I think when you and I think about a bear market and a recession, especially after being in, for years in crypto, we're used to like massive drawdowns for extended period of time. And I just don't see that happening in the current environment, but of course we're never, protected from a black swan event that changes everything, like COVID, for example, that just totally took people by surprise. So that's it. Sotiris?
Yeah. Well, I think as well with the macro side of things, especially more tech side of things, because pretty much everything else has been pretty flat, apart from the sort of Mag 7, the chip plays, the quantum plays, all of the frontier tech. I do think with a lot of the market stuff, again, I just try and be left of the bell curve as much as possible. But we saw a really big sell-off in sort of 21 to 22, where I think that really kind of that felt like, oh, we're in a recession, things are looking very doom and gloomy. I think that really gave us sort of a good foundation for like a prolonged bull market back up. And I think in crypto, we're so conditioned to feel like these boom bust bear cycles are like a 4-year phenomenon. So it's like, oh, you have like 2 good years, the music's about to stop, everything's going to crash. But the thing is with equities, you can have like a 10-year bull run basically. And obviously you'll have some like minor pullbacks here and there. But if you look at sort of most tech stocks from like 08 onwards, they've been pretty much a vertical line up until actually 21, 22, where we really started to see any sort of really significant pullback there. So I think we're not actually that far out of that recovery. And so it wouldn't surprise me that over the next few years, with all of the sort of tailwinds, especially now with all of the AI sort of focus, CapEx, and especially CapEx from companies that are already generating a lot of revenue to begin with, it just feels like risk assets are destined to keep going up. And again, obviously there could be pullbacks, and I think dips are good for adding, but part of me is always like worried because I'm like, things are too good. It must be a pullback. And when I start talking confidently, it's often a sign to sell, at least locally. But yeah, I don't know. It just feels like we're finally at this kind of inflection point, and there's been a confluence of things, especially with like the new admin and stuff. A lot of the, like you're saying, like QT sort of rolling off and the debasement of USD. I think that's something now the mainstream is starting to talk about. Whereas like crypto bros have been talking about it for the last 10 years, and it's why you should be buying Bitcoin. And again, all of that I think just plays into this kind of melt up for equities. So my equities portion has been doing quite nicely. I'm mostly allocated, or pretty much fully allocated to tech. However, crypto has been quite lackluster in comparison. I know we saw a bit of a bounce, but I think that sort of dislocation is either like crypto's front run this whole move, and now it's really taking off, or it's going to play catch up. It feels a bit strange where everything else is pumping so hard, and yet crypto can't really catch that much of a bid. I'm hoping it's a bit of a delay. But one thing I was thinking about the other day is when equities, well, especially tech, when that was absolutely pumping in, I think it was like late 22, 23, when it was like all the new sort of like ChatGPT meta, NVIDIA started to really catch a bid, really started to pump. I remember there was like a sort of 6-month period where it felt like tech stocks were just on a tear, and they were just like putting in higher high after higher high. And crypto during that period was remaining kind of flat, if not just sort of like sharp consolidation to the downside. So part of me is like, are we just in this sort of similar phase right now where a lot of guys already invested in crypto already in. Any additional money is going to be chasing equities right now because that's what's running. And then when equities sort of start to not necessarily even pull back, just like lose a bit of momentum, then people might sort of turn their attention back to crypto to catch a bid. But Justin, love to hear your take as well.
Yeah, I mean, I don't really have a different take because I kind of agree with your analysis, and it's a very balanced one where it's like it could be this or it could be that. I feel like my heart leans towards the fact that crypto has kind of front run this market, right? Where, of course, you've got the AI narrative that's pushing everything forward, but that's a very tech. You need to be AI adjacent in order to benefit from it. And I think crypto is not that close or close enough, to benefit from it. And so if you look at the price action of Bitcoin, which not that long ago was still kind of hovering around the 20K, 30K range, which kind of sounds funny to talk about because we're now like above the 100K, but it really was. And I feel like if you were looking at crypto then and you see the massive ramp up and you're like, okay, the all-time high is like 125, right? If I'm not mistaken. It's like, it's really hard to be a net new buyer at this level thinking you're going to get an extra 20 or 30%. And even if you think you're getting an extra 20 or 30%, is Bitcoin the best risk adjusted place, to get those 20, 30% versus tech, some kind of energy stock, some kind of smaller cap that is also supporting, the AI narrative or the robotics narrative or whatever it is. And I think that's what's keeping us down, right? Or not even keeping us down, but just kind of leaving us where we are, which is, are you willing to part with your Bitcoin when all the big asset managers are supporting it? A lot of corporates are launching new products that are blockchain based, crypto adjacent, and so on. And the administration is so positive and you're cutting rates. Not really, but do you see that much upside? I think I am long term, but I don't think that necessarily people who haven't been involved yet are willing to put new, fresh capital into this. And so it leaves us in limbo until you get a next catalyst, I guess, right? And that's the only thing that worries me. Like I remain as bullish as I've ever been, but I do think we'll need like a kick in order to get pushed, to higher levels. And I don't know what that's going to be. And then the other thing that worries me that I really wanted to talk about on this call with you guys is the likelihood of an altcoin season, because I feel like that's something people are talking about a bit more, and mostly in a negative way because it just hasn't happened. And so I'm like, if you're looking at all the altcoins, it's just so depressing, basically, right? And it's so hard to change. Of course, people's memory are short, but it's like it's so hard to really change the dynamic where it's like, who the hell is going to be buying Near, And I'm holding Near, right? So that's what I'm thinking about it. But I'm just saying, like, who's going to be buying Near? Who's buying Chainlink? Okay, maybe some people because, this or that. Who's buying Ton? Who's buying Polkadot? Who's buying, Uni or something, right? And there's a lot of reasons why you could, but I just don't see that happening. And I don't see that happening on a broad scale. And I don't know. I don't know what you guys, if there is hope or if there's no hope, and what's your thinking behind it?
I'm hearing a sentiment shift from our last call.
Well, not on Bitcoin, but I think on the altcoins, 100%. Which is it's that meme of the guy with the stick that's like, do something, and I'm like, how is it possible that Bitcoin recoups? They get killed during the liquidation, and then they don't really recoup, right? So,
one interesting thing I noticed today, though, actually, was because we've seen like a sort of small pullback on Bitcoin. Normally, for the last pretty much 3 years, Bitcoin goes up, altcoins kind of potter about, slowly catch up. Like generally, altcoins haven't run like super hard, except for sort of like the meme coin, AI coin, meta stuff, or at least not like we saw in previous cycles. But normally, if Bitcoin like sneezed, altcoins would just nuke. Whereas today, I feel like for the first time, and as long as I can remember this cycle at least, Bitcoin saw a moderately significant pullback, like not a huge amount, but like a few altcoins I'm following at least hadn't really reacted that negatively and were actually still holding up relatively well. And so I found that quite a sort of interesting point. Maybe it depends also like the relative strength of some altcoins. But I don't know, that could potentially indicate like altcoin sellers are sort of a bit exhausted at this point, and so anyone who would have sold has sold. I personally am only holding Bitcoin and Hype at the moment. Looking to add ZEC as well, because I think that's quite interesting. But ultimately, I've just been like, I just got too exhausted holding altcoins. I'm like, fuck this bullshit. I'm out. Sold like a few weeks ago, and honestly, I felt so much better for it because they have just been so depressing to hold and watch, just like slowly creep down, which again is probably a sign that I should be back in altcoins. But yeah, it's just been a bit disappointing. And just a couple of things to touch on before I give it to Thomas. With your point on Bitcoin, especially, I think the risk-adjusted returns now is what you got to kind of look at. And so one of the nice things with crypto is generally the risk reward if you're buying, especially in the lows of a bear market, is very asymmetric. So it might go down like 50%, but it could do a 20x. So it's like kind of worth the gamble. Like right now, though, it's like you're saying, Bitcoin, it might go even to 200K, but it could also pull back 50, 60, 70% like it's done in previous cycles. And so now it's like, oh, am I risking 20, 30% upside for a potentially 60% drawdown? And I think that makes it slightly harder to just be a blind buyer of. And then also, again, it's hard not to be too jaded, especially, or coming across too jaded when talking like this, but like the whole crypto space, especially since Trump has come in, has now become less regulated again, which I think has sort of enabled a lot more predatory and extractive sort of behaviors. And so we've seen a lot of new projects run, a lot of new DATs get created, things like this, which has enabled certain players to kind of probably extract quite a lot more from the market than they would have otherwise. And so I think the playing field is actually nowhere near as fair as it maybe used to be. And especially if you compare the playing field to that of, say, like tech stocks, where you do have publicly listed companies who have to report to the SEC and have to have all of their things transparent. And it's like not perfect, but like with traditional equities, it's actually quite a lot harder just to like rug pull and dump on your followers and mass extract without facing any ramifications, which I think, especially now since Trump has come in, it's like no holds bars again in crypto, which I think is like good and bad. Like the libertarian in me is like, viva la no rules, but also it means more sophisticated people will just like dump on the plebs continuously.
But so Teresa, please go on to this point, but I just want to interject and ask, like, but do you feel like there's more of that than before, or is it just that the market, like habits in terms of like not holding for long term and just trying to extract value has become the norm? Because I personally don't feel like that regulations have been lower and so you have more bad actors. Like it doesn't feel that way, but I don't know if you have examples, beyond the DATs, which I think are kind of a unique concept, but yeah.
No, I definitely think so, because obviously SEC kind of got gutted with Gary Gensler, and they sort of put in new broad sweeping things, giving, again, around like meme coins and NFTs, for example, defining those as collectibles. So I think that really kind of it gave people a very risk-on approach. And now I think you're seeing a lot of new companies pop up doing a lot of sort of like these revenue buyback mechanisms and things like that you like just no one would dare to do under Gensler's rule because they were scared of getting sued. And now I think that sort of risk has been lifted. It's meant a lot more projects can just kind of, again, kind of like it used to be back in the day, but now, you look at like a Believe and Launchcoin and things like that. Like everyone's like, oh, the guy just like rugged his followers for like 40 million. And it's like, well.
But the thing I would add, though, and sorry, I feel like, Thomas, we haven't let you talk, enough. But on that point, I still don't feel like it's necessarily that's the issue, because you could also have just buyers of legit projects that we know, right? You could have buyers of the Chainlink, the Ethereum, the Solana, the Uni, the BNB, and so on, like stuff that, it could always happen, but so far hasn't been rug pulled. And so it's like that's what I'm missing, right? I'm not talking about the degen traders that are going 5x on meme coins and getting screwed, because I'm like, it almost feels like gangsters killing each other. It's kind of like you're playing the game and now you're suffering the consequences, and it was going to end badly one way or the other, right? Or you were going to make a lot of money and exit the market at the right time. But the point is, I think the frustration for a lot of people these days with altcoins is even the quality projects, quote unquote, aren't even really being picked up. Like you had a new Solana ETF, I think, that came through with inflows. And you look at Solana, it's like, yeah, I mean, it's good, right? It's performing okay, but we're not on a tier or a ramp up that's going to outperform Bitcoin. If you look at the whole ramp up from 20K all the way to 120K, right? So I don't know. Yeah, I don't know. So Sotiris, no, reply to that, and then I think Thomas, maybe you'll have.
No, nothing really more for me to add. Just one final thing. Greatest disappointment of like supposedly quality projects that are just down only. Plasma, so XPL. It's like a prime example of something that's meant to actually be good tech, and it has just been an agonizing down only pretty much since launch.
But not even a down only. I think it's even worse, because there was a time where it did, like, you had the usual pump, dump, at launch, and then it moved back up. And I think a lot of people were like, yeah, this is like a quality project. The sellers are done. We can start going up, and I have such a long view for this and that. Yeah, exactly.
I remember this point. I was like, it's got a really nice rounded bottom. It's just breaking up above the previous support. And then it's like, no, wait, fuck you and your lungs.
Totally.
Oh, Jesus. But yeah, Thomas, would love to get your take on just the state of altcoins and anything else.
I think a lot to dissect. But I think it was really interesting too, because it was quite interesting. So a couple of things I'll add. So firstly, in terms of regulation and it now being a little bit more predatory, I just want to remind everyone of 2021 and the SPAC, the SPAC era, which is sort of probably as legal as any rug pull can be, right? So that's that was quite an interesting one. But I think and I don't think that the legislation necessarily. Obviously, we've got a lot more clarity around stablecoins, with a lot more things that are now being resolved. And the main problem there is ultimately who can distribute the yield, and can the yield be distributed directly by by stablecoin issuers? Or does that have to be going through like an exchange or another third party? Which is this is when it gets really interesting, right? Also for banks, especially. So I feel we're now in this sort of political Washington rut where the power players it's a power struggle at this point, and they're just trying to not level the playing field, but quite the opposite, just adjusting it so that they can fight. They'll be having a much better fight. So and I mean, obviously the way the US works is very much on a risk adjusted approach, and if you remove this sort of blind enforcement that's very crippling for any sort of firm of the SEC, then it's a lot easier to sort of say, right, we haven't got 100% clarity, but we understand that the administration is trying to build or turn the USA into a digital, or the world leader in digital assets. So therefore, more likely than not, you probably won't get sued if you follow all the other rules, right? And I think that's sort of the main shift that I've seen. We also had an interesting discussion on altcoins and Bitcoin and generally risk-adjusted return. I think the way I think about this is duration. So, and duration, like in simple terms, is how long is that going to take to pay off? If it's actually good. And I think if I look at tech stocks, they probably have a much higher duration than, say, very sort of traditional industrials in the S&P, which is a function of ultimately them generating enough cash flow and a higher part of their valuation coming from the cash that they bring in, right? Which removes obviously a lot of uncertainty. And if you now sort of then go a bit further, right, on that duration curve, then you get from, I don't know, like a Caterpillar to eventually high risk or high parabola tech stocks. And Bitcoin, I feel, sort of a little bit higher than that. You're probably looking at maybe 10 years as opposed to maybe 7 years from a sort of Nasdaq perspective, and altcoins will be out even further, right? So in order for monies to sort of flow or kind of climb up the duration curve, you need a lot more certainty, because you don't get these. It doesn't make sense to sort of enter a trade if you've not got a solid market where you can start assessing that risk and return, because I think right now that's sort of very, very difficult, because you can't also expose yourself too much to it, which means that you need more leverage, if that makes sense. So you will be probably allocating like a smaller chunk of your portfolio at a much higher leverage, because you still have to it still has to kind of make it worth your while. And so I think from that perspective, that's what I still believe we are going to see, because I also want to remind everyone that the greatest returns, or the biggest run up and the best sort of positive volatility that we have usually seen, comes at the very end of the cycle. And that's when, if we're thinking of 2017, right? 2018, if you're looking at that period specifically, is most of that run up, especially if you have a much lower base, is going to be in the very, very last leg, not even the last leg, the very last leg of this market, which then is going to attract more buyers. And I think that's we've not seen that yet. I don't think I've not seen this whole, well, we're going up, 50%, we'll go down another 30% from there. And then, we sort of keep doing that. So that retail mania, I don't think we've seen just yet, but I do still believe we'll see it. One interesting catalyst, and I'd love to get your take on this as well, is MicroStrategy and the probability of it being added to the S&P, because mechanically, there should be a lot more capital allocated to MicroStrategy, right, just from index funds. So that will be a very, very vanilla mechanics, which is going to help them quite a bit, because it removes the volatility to some extent, or it will increase it, but in a positive fashion, unless it's being front run. But typically, whenever a stock is being added to the S&P, there have been multiple studies, it's always been a good trade. But to be fair, there's never been anything as levered as MicroStrategy that would have levered on an asset that is as volatile as Bitcoin. So famous last words, I'll say, but generally speaking, I think that could be an interesting trigger. What do you guys think?
So on that specifically, because I remember saying a few weeks or month ago, MicroStrategy had essentially qualified for all the markers to be added, yet they decided not to add it because I guess too high risk, too volatile. Do you see that changing anytime soon? Like why they would change their stance and decide to add it if they sort of chose not to just this last rebalancing?
Yes, I think they fulfilled the criteria, which is, I think it's 6 quarters of profitability and a few other balance sheet sort of ratios, plus the market cap criteria that they need to fulfill. And then it comes down to the committee, which can essentially exercise a lot of, they've got a lot of freedom, but I think, and at that point, we're going back to this sort of political level. And I think that the political pressure is more likely than not to succeed in effectively pushing over that domino to effectively help. So if I had to guess, it will be one where the more assessment periods we're looking at, the more likely they are to add it. And so I would not be surprised, to be honest, because it is ultimately very novel. They still have cash flow from their traditional business. So yeah, I think if I had to bet on this, I would definitely say it is going to happen. How soon that's going to be an uncertainty. And I think that, and I could be wrong with this, but I think more people will be surprised when it will come out, because of they'll be probably they'll be on the wrong foot when it does come out. So yeah, I think eventually it will get added. Is that going to be in 3 months or 6 months? I'm not sure. Is that going to be the next month? I'm not sure, but I would probably think that over the course of the next year, eventually will get added.
Do you think it's still a buy as well at these sort of at these sort of levels? Because I know the premium has been sort of shrinking a lot, and I think we mentioned it on the last call. Like some of these DATs are now, well, they were at least at that time, starting to trade under sort of MNAV. Yeah, it feels like if Bitcoin's got another leg in it, strategy will sort of outperform like it's done in the past. But are you holding or?
Not at the moment, because it got very, very crazy. But I think so. If we have that confirmation that it is going to be added to the S&P, then I think it will be an interesting trade from a risk reward perspective. Again, with the assumption that I think that there's still a lot of room in Bitcoin because there's a lot of capital that is still rotating into this asset, and I think a lot of it is OTC. We've now got the ability, and this is in the US, to effectively put or have Bitcoin and Ethereum part of your overall wealth assessment for things like mortgages, etc. So I think more likely than not, this is going to happen. There's a lot of OTC trades, or rather swaps, where you can now directly deposit Bitcoin in order to get shares or ETF shares, which is I think also something that's very, very good in terms of regulation. So I think at the moment it's sort of a accumulation period. So yes, I think once we have it in the S&P, with the assumption that Bitcoin still has probably a bit of a run ahead of it, I think it's definitely a good risk reward trade. Yeah. Again, we just need to have the confirmation on the S&P, and then statistically you're there, and it doesn't matter the volatility of Bitcoin. Statistically, you're more likely to win. And so from that perspective, it's a trade.
How are we thinking about gold as well? Because I know that had a pretty crazy run up. Also, one thing to note with gold, in like obviously parabolic moves are the most volatile to the upside, but the last few days before it sort of at least topped out locally, it was basically adding the market cap of Bitcoin in a day. Which, when you kind of make the gold Bitcoin analogy, it does kind of still put into perspective sort of how much relatively smaller Bitcoin is in comparison to gold, hopefully allowing more upside potential in the future. But obviously with gold, I think you saw pictures of people queuing up outside the shops I'm not sure if they were queuing up to sell their gold or to buy the gold. I'm guessing to buy the gold because it was very frothy. But yeah, I feel like you couldn't have written a more textbook local top for something like that. Will it scream higher in the next 6 to 12 months? No idea, but how are you guys feeling? And also, how are you feeling with it topping and then any correlation to Bitcoin, good or bad?
I wish I had it on hand, but I remember seeing an amazing picture that is like, for the crypto bulls, it's like the absolute hopium, showing essentially places where Bitcoin is when gold tops at different cycles. And it kind of showed this thing where it's like, oh, gold is topping around now. Of course, at the time it wasn't confirmed. And then there's like the massive ramp up of Bitcoin. So if that's true, I mean, please let it be true. I'm a holder of gold and a holder of Bitcoin. So either way, I'll be happy. But I do think, and that's why I'm sharing my screen here, is if you look at it on a daily or a weekly basis, and if you look at the indicator at the bottom, which is a slowed stochastic, which is kind of like a smoothed leading indicator, you can't help but see that there's this kind of rapid move up, and there's this kind of massive move up, and then this overbought level, which in the past, to be fair, hasn't necessarily resulted in a pullback or like a long-term pullback. But I feel like once you've gone up like this, and then you see this type of candle on a weekly basis, or maybe on a monthly basis, when you see something that's looking like a long tail but up and going down, maybe it's time to take money off of the table. I mean, of course, I'm not selling my stuff, But I'm just saying from a chart perspective, it doesn't look super bullish at this level. So yeah, I don't know.
That
Yeah.
with gold top to Bitcoin inflection point though is a good one. I wish we could pull it up.
The only thing is actually when you look at the chart more, there's one that's on a monthly basis and then another one on a daily basis, and so it feels like the scale is a bit skewed in a way
Oh, I
to,
found it.
to kind of
Yeah.
make the narrative fit. But when you look at it, and even the fact that the scale is different doesn't necessarily change the fact that at some point, you know, gold's at a certain level and then Bitcoin kind of ramps up. I don't know. And to be fair, like now that I'm looking at it on a daily basis, and you've got that indicator that's on the oversold side, and then an engulfing candle that's kind of eating the two previous red candles, maybe you see kind of another move up, but I don't feel like it doesn't look like a breakout. It doesn't look like it wants to go higher and create new all-time highs. So I don't know. I'd be cautious for the gold bugs out there, and between the two, I would rather be holding. I'd rather be holding gold than Bitcoin.
Yeah, so I think this is the chart you're referring to, right? And you saw the previous top of gold.
Yeah.
It sort of indicated a nice move up in, what was that, August 20? And then I guess this one's more local tops. And then
but this is the one. That's the one. And so if you look on the left, it's on a monthly. Oh, it's on a weekly basis, and on the right, it's on a daily basis. So I think the scale is just a little bit, weird.
I see.
But it doesn't take away from the fact. I mean, it doesn't take away from the fact that you've got
gold down, Bitcoin up. Yeah.
Yeah.
We hope.
And it would make sense. I mean, I think again, I think I'm preaching in the choir and in my own echo chamber, but I feel like Bitcoin is an answer to so many issues that gold is also kind of an answer to, but in a more modern way, with more transferability, more decentralization, a more finite supply. And I'm like, in a world that's de-dollarizing and where you have geopolitical issues and fiat currency is debasing long term, it just feels hard to make a case against Bitcoin. So yeah, that's it.
On that note, are you guys following any of the new narrative around Zcash and again, like privacy, ancient whales starting to convert some of their Bitcoin stack into ZEC?
I love when you sell us something. I feel like you're seconds away from saying it has huge military and civilian application. It might be the best thing I've seen through my desk.
Honestly, so I was like getting pretty bullish on Zcash and the whole privacy thing, and like just the way zero knowledge proof works is pretty fascinating and quite ingenious. One thing to know with Zcash, a lot of the developers are Israeli, and so it was like the three co-founders have ties to Israel or were like studying there and things like that. So as far as like no backdoors and privacy go, it doesn't fill me with the biggest confidence when you've got the looming threat of like Mossad. But as far as like price action goes, it's been on a tear. It's nearly done a 3x since nearly done a 10x since August. Had the likes of like Naval, Ravikant sort of shilling it and things like that. I'm starting to see quite a lot of the sort of more prominent voices from sort of 2017 cycles and 2021 cycles start to sort of talk more about it. The last few weeks it's just been on absolute tear. Not sure, again, if you look at the RSI or even on the weekly, it's looking insane, like insanely overbought. But yeah, I know it seems like a pretty interesting narrative, interesting sort of take on, again, what you're just saying about Bitcoin as a sort of like slight pushback to the direction where Bitcoin's gone, where it was meant to be this sort of decentralized, libertarian sort of alternative to the current system, and now it's basically been consumed by TradFi. You've got ETFs, governments holding it, like all of this stuff that is quite sort of antithetical to what probably Bitcoin was trying to push back against initially. And again, it's all narratives and people trying to like pump their bags, but I feel something like Zcash does sort of tap into some more of those sort of more like idealistic cypherpunk sort of, this is truly private, it can't be stopped.
Do you know about the decentralization on Zcash?
So it's proof of work.
Proof of work, okay.
Fully mined at this point, I believe. And so I feel it has a similar sort of distributed node network as Bitcoin. Probably nowhere near as large, but yeah. And people are saying it's like quantum proof. I'm not sure how accurate that is, but another rabbit hole I've been going down, and it's like quantum computing, especially with some of the newest advancements and how a lot of crypto might need to update probably sooner than we think. But yeah, I don't know. I'm not sure if just any thoughts on your side on that.
The only thing is I feel like this chart, it almost scares me because it's too vertical. Do you know what I mean? So I'm like, I feel like almost like the same argument as like, do you want to be buying Bitcoin as like a new entrant at these levels? It's a bit tough. And I'm like, when I'm looking at it, I'm like, holy shit, it's like so flat and down. And then you've got this massive ramp up, which is probably a very positive catalysis, right? Where it's like, there's been this, and then there's a shift in perception, right? But it's like, in order to enter, I would love if there was like a 50% pullback or a 20% pullback. So I'm like, okay, there's a new narrative. I'm willing to put a ticket here. I'll swap some of my, excuse my French, shit coins, into Zcash, because Zcash is a great coin and it's all in the tech. But at least I can ride it, and like here's stuff, man.
Yeah, I just know pullback. And that's the thing as well. I feel this cycle has just been so unforgiving. It's like, if you're not already in coins, it's almost impossible to get in unless you just ape into something that's already ripping. Because even with Bitcoin, the moves have just been, especially on like a weekly basis, each move has just been so violent that if you've not been in, almost impossible to catch it. Like this move up, I remember from like 26 to 40 happened in a few weeks. And then this one, 42 up to like 75, so like 4 weeks. And that's Bitcoin. And then if you didn't catch it, if you were like waited for a pullback that basically did not happen those first 5 weeks, and you bought in anywhere around here, you then had a nice 6 months of like downward chop to contest with. And then you better hope you caught it for that 1 month for the next leg up. And so I'm guessing it's just a product of more sophisticated players in the market as well, and more algo driven price action. But damn, there's been a hard cycle.
I mean, but it's been also very, very it trades a lot more like an equity, and what I think we mustn't forget as well is the sort of volatility that we've been exposed to, which also wasn't necessarily normal. I think there's especially notable the trade war, right? So if you were to generally sort of carve that out, but yeah, agreed. And I do remember 2024, that sort of run up post the ETF announcement, and then we've had this massive drop. But even before then, there was this, I think the Matrix Sport Analyst report where it wasn't going to be, so a lot of people had been taken out. So I think the leverage, this is actually something that I'd love to understand, is the leverage and the accessibility is probably a lot higher. And I think if I had to guess, this cycle was probably a lot more levered than any of the other cycles beforehand, where it would have been predominantly spot, whereas now you've got a lot of derivatives that have been introduced and are also, I mean, the UI, the UX was a lot better. Well, the experience, I guess, arguably after October 10, maybe not, but it's very seamless to get exposure to it, right? And you've got Coinbase as well. They've added futures, they've added perps. So I think from that perspective, it's super accessible. But yeah, I think this is actually really nicely the way you've labeled it, and I still think that we're in a sort of institutional, structured bit, and that's why I still believe we're definitely in an area of in that sort of cycle of accumulation, rather than that exponential run up with everybody FOMOing into Bitcoin. I mean, it's very similar to gold, right? I mean, this move has been driven by central bank buying, right? But eventually, retail's going to jump in on that as well, and then you've got a lot of easy access to derivatives, and a lot of money would have been put into gold. And I think so. And nothing changes sentiment like price. And I think and it's actually mental at like 110 at the moment, but the minute it moves up back to like 120, the sentiment on crypto Twitter shifts like crazy. And that sort of that would be actually my biggest argument on. Generally, I think the sentiment and the expectations are extremely subdued for double checking Bitcoin being at 110,000, and everybody's extremely bearish. I can only reiterate that. And if in 6 months' time we're at 200,000, then I'd love to sort of, circle back to this and give me like a virtual high five, because and that's my expectation still. I've not seen anything like crazy, and this is accumulation to me. So I think
I guess the only slight thing with that is we're also back at levels we first saw basically December of last year. So it's almost been a year of sideways action, which I think is also sort of given people to like recalibrate, like, Bitcoin above 100K. Again, I completely hear what you're saying. Like, Bitcoin above 100K already should be like celebrated and like people delusionally bullish. But I think we've had quite a lot of time to sort of get used to that idea now. And I think people are just tired. And I think the hardest thing to swallow, just talking about like sentiment, especially on crypto Twitter, and I feel it as well, is like the biggest sort of psyop that has been shoved down the throat of like crypto bros is like equities, gold is bullshit. All you need is crypto. And seeing equities, gold, all of this just like rip higher as Bitcoin and crypto as a whole like either stagnates or declines, I think definitely magnifies the pain. Because if everything's kind of chopping or everything's going sideways, whatever, but then when you've got like all of the fancy tech stocks absolutely ripping and like Bitcoin has basically gone sideways for a year, it's kind of pretty painful.
Sorry, that was my alarm.
Time to wake up.
Do you think it's the same with altcoins? I'm just kind of steering the conversation back to that because I feel like it's still the big unknown. And I'm like, I think maybe you've said it in the best way, which is, people are tired basically. And it's like, does it then become a battle of like whoever can stay in the longest, kind of hold this pain the longest, eventually prevails? Or was it a question of, you moved fast and kind of cut your losses and jumped on another winner, which might be equity, as you said, or something? I don't know.
One Difficult. Thing I feel really summarizes the life of a crypto holder is this meme. Have you seen the rat image?
Yeah,
like this study, where basically it's like so horribly cruel and awful just to think about, but
oh yeah, I know that.
They put rats in a jar. Basically, initially they gave up and just drowned after 15 minutes, but once they'd kind of like given up and started drowning, they rescued a few of the rats, let them sort of regain sort of their energy again, put them back in the water, and then the second time they swam for 60 hours because they were holding on the hope of like being saved. And man, you just look at most of the crypto market, it really feels like we're all the fucking rats, just like paddling for dear life, hoping to remember the sort of 1000x gains of like 2017. in 2021, and
This is it.
instead we've had a paltry 5x, not even a 5x, a paltry like 3x in 4 years.
From
From
the
something
absolute,
like Chainlink as well. It's crazy. So,
yeah.
so this
I
was
still like
actually, this is
Chainlink.
actually a good product, and
Yeah.
the price action on this is like still so subdued. It is just, it's ridiculous. It should be
We just need a chain link DAT. That is the solution to all our problems. More DATs. You know?
seriously. But again, talking about Chainlink, I feel again in hindsight, buying it at $17
Yeah.
will be such an obvious buy in say like 5-10 years when Chainlink is like fueling the whole new digitized on-chain economy. And why didn't we buy it at mere 3x?
Says the guy who started the call by saying, I have Bitcoin and hype and I feel so much better for it. Okay, sure. No, we should totally buy Link.
I've been this freaking rat, man. I've hit my 60-hour limit and drowned.
The thing is, you know, the weird thing is I can totally imagine and understand the psychological relief of being like, you know what, I'm closing all my position that I'm not 100% convinced with, and I stick to Bitcoin and I stick to one other conviction play. The only thing is for me, I think the rat meme is the thing. It's like for me with the altcoins, I've been holding them for so long, and I've gone through cycles with them, and I'm like, I can't let go basically. And I know this is terrible, and if I was looking at the chart today, I wouldn't be buying them. But the thing is, they've gone down for so much anyway that it's like, you know what? It's X amount of money. It's not going to change my life one way or the other. And if I were to convert them now to another token, and then the previous ones start to perform, I'm going to hate myself. And so I don't know. I just feel paralyzed. Basically.
Like as soon as you sell, inevitably it's going to plummet.
Exactly.
Hate yourself. But I do think on both the way up and the way down, it's important, I think, to sort of ask yourself that question. Like you said, it's like, would I be a buyer here? Probably not. So then, I don't know, say if you got 50 grand or 10 grand or $1,000 or whatever in a coin, it's like, that's still money that you can realize. And if you had the same amount of cash just sat in your account today in stables, would you go and buy that coin now with that money? And if you wouldn't, then you're probably better to sell it. But then inevitably it pumps and you want to jump off a bridge. But
I think one of the reasons why it's so challenging at the moment to sort of get so even if you look at Plasma, right? The problem as well is that valuations are much higher to begin with, and from there it's obviously really difficult to take on any gains unless you're anywhere on the left-hand side before the 22nd of October, right? And I think that's so I think the market's also moved a lot more, and this is Justin, I think you touched on, I think it was Sotiris, it being more unfair than before, and I think that's fair, because I think a lot more people that sort of get the chance to buy in before TGE are on much better terms, right? But again, they're also exposed to a lot more risk. There's a lot more legal side to a lot more legal things that they're having to go through. Time they're having to commit to these things. So I think that's just the issue. But that said, we're also seeing a lot of movements. We're seeing now Western Union on Solana with stable coins, which is, by the way, an absolute no-brainer. And I think people are using fiat happily until they realize at a certain point it is an absolute pain to move money. It is an absolute pain. I think most people don't realize how painful it is because there's multiple banks involved, and any transaction cross-border that's like greater than $1 million is so unreliable to sort of get that across. And stablecoins are such a great
insanely
product.
Bad. I was just literally reminded that the other day. I've been waiting for a payment for a customer, and it's taken 4 days, and then they sent the money on a Friday, like European time, and then you had like the Hong Kong like over the weekend, so it didn't come through, and then there's a public holiday on the Tuesday or something, so then it still didn't come through, and it's just this like 5-6 day process to receive some money. And yeah, stables is basically instant. It's and that's the thing, like why one of the reasons I was so bullish on Plasma, and I probably will try and get back into it. It's like I feel stable coins is going to be the primary use case for crypto, at least in the sort of short-term future, because it's like the most globally accessible. It's got the product market fit. It's actually something that like non-crypto natives can also benefit from. Because I feel there's like a lot of like really cool innovation with DeFi and stuff, but it's very niche, like being able to sort of like generate yield on your Ethereum holdings by depositing it into Aave, and then you're getting the staked ETH token and all of this stuff. It's like, it's not that user friendly, and it's like pretty abstract. But like you said, stable coins, like being able to transfer USD across the globe instantly, it's like, I could see a lot of people wanting to use that. And you just sort of psyop blockchain use into the world through stable coins. And then it's like, how do you get more exposure to it? Do you just buy Circle? Like, do you buy XPL? Do you buy Tether?
Scroll down a bit. I think Robinhood, Coinbase, they're probably the best players to sort of, and Robinhood's done extraordinarily well. I also did get into like quite a bit, simply because I think they've done really well. And there's a lot of additional segues. So I wouldn't be surprised if at some point like Robinhood were to be some sort of like super app as well. Buy anything, send money, issue your credit card. It's like a one-stop shop. And so I think this is how people can get exposure to this sort of stablecoin innovation. There's Revolut, which they're obviously not public, but ultimately they will be. I think Consensus is going to go public as well, but I'm not too excited about that. But yeah, so I think we're seeing a lot of innovation, right? And we're seeing a lot of things. And I think if you go back to the 2020, the 2001 like internet bubble, right? If you look at Amazon being down 97%, if you're I think down, Google, I can't remember what it was, and I think that sort of paradigm we're looking at. And so from that perspective, am I comfortable holding Ethereum for 20 years? Yes. I think that's something that's an absolute no-brainer. Is it gonna like rip and completely crash and it's gonna make people really unhappy? Absolutely. There's no doubt about that. But eventually one sort of technology is gonna really help move money. And that's at the moment is anything that's sitting on Ethereum. And so from that perspective, it will just be interesting to see what sort of platforms are going to be used. And I'm very certain that there's going to be a lot more coins and tokens that will be created. And I think especially in a token front, if you think of, and I'm completely making this up, like a Lululemon fan token that's like issued by Robinhood. And if you buy it, you can get like 5% discount. Imagine just on a retail side what that can do. And I think from that perspective, I think there's a lot of, we just need to be patient at this point, and in a year's time, and 2 years, 3 years time, we'll be fine. And we'll be still swimming, and it will be a lot longer than 60 hours, and it will probably feel more like 6,000 hours, but I'm certain we will still be swimming.
Keep swimming.
That's a really good experiment, actually. But yeah, and I think, look, we've nearly drowned so many times, and I think it's just, at this point, this is a time to be patient, a time to, I think, generally get probably more exposure, no financial advice, and just be smart about it. And diamond hands, but the thing is, if diamond hands, where are the diamond hands?
If we have top though for this cycle, which a large part of me probably thinks we have, I desperately want to be proved wrong, then we should not be holding. Like, I know it's easy just to say diamond hand it, like it will recover eventually, but it's such a like EV negative way to play it. And I think we've been through 3 cycles now, and I think all of us at the depths of a bear market, if we were like, oh, actually, you can just go back 6 months and sell everything, would you do it? Like all of us would be like, yeah, obviously, like now I can buy a bunch of stuff at a discount. And so I think just that sort of blind hold and hope approach, whilst on a long enough time horizon, it probably will pan out for Bitcoin, maybe Ethereum, maybe Solana. I feel, given how active we are, you are still potentially like leaving a lot on the table by just sort of hodling through a bear market. And obviously, like at some point it becomes a bit of a forced hodl because it's already down so much, you might as well not bother selling it. But I don't know, if we're like in a toppy range and everything looks pretty toasted and the 4-year cycle has already kind of triggered, it's like, I don't want to be the bear, but I think if it has topped, we are better to sell now and then buy back in a year or two when we see things bottom out. But again, obviously that's like retardedly easy to say. So just like sell the top and buy the bottom. It's like job done, then you'll be rich. But I think there is some sort of middle ground. And one thing on that point, actually, I know it sounds sort of delusionally simplistic, but I really like Bob Lucas. So I think he's been, especially his like YouTube videos have been like scarily on point throughout most of the cycle, especially if you go back through listening to them all. And for him, he doesn't just take this like blind like hodl strategy, but he will take this sort of like very long-term swing trade where he's like, he's happy to miss selling the perfect top and miss buying the perfect bottom, but he's like, if I can just sort of like buy somewhere near the bottom, sell somewhere near the top, and you do that every 4 years on a cycle, like he's got massive outperformance than if he were just to like bought and hold. But also I should have just held the Bitcoin I had originally and I'd be far wealthier than I am now. So
I think it's the accumulation that probably is going to be key, right? And the minute we're in a bear market, I think the sort of T-wopping it is probably the best way one can do, right? But yeah, I think in terms of, so I get the whole like 4-year cycle and that sort of thing, but I think from a liquidity perspective, we're still pretty good. We're generally looking into a very, very supportive paradigm in terms of how expensive money is at the moment. And there's going to be a lot more liquidity to be unlocked over the next, 6 to 9 months, if not the next 12 months, whilst we're still looking at a fairly stable and constructive economy. So I think from that perspective, I don't see why we're not in this last leg. And there's still a lot more gains to be had. And it's probably the time to sort of put in the orders, the sell orders, to make sure that, and I mean, I obviously did start selling at 100 already, but ultimately that's over time, you just got to distribute it. And then you just can't be too early when we are in a confirmed bear market. You just have to wait a bit longer than what seems attractive. And when it doesn't seem attractive anymore, when Bitcoin's dead again, it's the sort of time to buy it. But it's easier said than done. But for now, I think from risk reward perspective, it's still probably better. I would still expect a positive price movement. And if I'm wrong, then that's that. And then we're talking 4 years and probably have the very same discussion. But I think ultimately hodling is the most effective way of achieving this, simply because it's a discipline that's incredibly difficult, like as we all know. So from that perspective, for most people, it's just hodling.
I think as well, it's easy to hodl easier to hodl Bitcoin because it is unique in its position, whereas I think that's just also part of the problem. As each cycle goes on, there's just infinite supply of altcoins, and it's hard to say, I don't know, hodl near, for example, like how confident you holding that in 15 years. It's like you can see how almost every coin, especially compared to like Bitcoin, has basically just been down only over a multi-year sort of horizon.
Except Yellow Pepe, which is going to go to the moon, according to Tom.
Yes, let's touch on meme coins. We've not even spoken about meme coins, which I think is really, really quite interesting. So I think at this point, I'm getting even more excited to like get some additional exposure because we're not even talking about meme coins. So I think from that perspective, it's very subdued, very negative, but yeah, I think that's going to shift. I have a feeling that will shift. But yeah, it's not been.
God damn it, Yellow Pepe. I did end up selling my Yellow Pepe, but I had a bit of a ride up. So,
Are you still holding your cards?
No, I've literally sold everything apart from Bitcoin.
Right.
Cards I really liked, and I feel the actual platform wasn't great, which was the only thing that made me less confident in it. Because I actually tried to sort of like buy some of the cards, and all the prices were like messed up, and they were really sloppy with the currency conversion and things. So like obviously like UI you can iron out, but with cards specifically, I feel they do well during like times of Pokemon frothiness, and I'm not paying close attention to the Pokemon markets, but I think they have also locally topped. So until they sort of start to come back, I think this will probably underperform for now. But it's down to 18 million, so I know it topped to like 80 something, so maybe worth a punt for a longer term hold. But
Let's see.
All I'm looking at the moment is Tau, Zek, and Hype.
You're not into Aster anymore?
I begrudgingly sold my Aster. It pained me, but it's one of those that I think in hindsight will be such an obvious, like, why didn't you buy it at $1 type thing. But right now, I don't see CZ supporting it and shilling it, I think, in the way it probably needs. And as an actual platform, it wasn't great. The execution was like kind of a bit sloppy and all over the place, and talking about balance amounts not updating properly and things. Like, it still felt very sort of like beta sort of product. So I'm just not convinced it's going to get the sort of. I feel Hype has just sort of won this cycle for on-chain perps, and so to bet against that is purely a narrative play, which I think if CC starts tweeting about it and people are like, BSC season again, it'll absolutely rip. But
no,
yeah, right now, what's even the ticker for it? I forget.
ASTER is the name.
You can see how committed I was to it, Christ. Yeah, so it's like $1, so I'm sure it's a.
I think
here's the place to buy it. If you want to punt. But yeah, I don't know. I'm still a bit spooked after that flash crash. I feel you don't see that kind of weird shit happening when everything's rosy. I don't think we've seen or heard of any big players yet get fully wiped out from it, but
give it time.
Yeah, I don't know. It just feel it was just such a big liquidation event, and people are just like, "Oh, it's just a mechanical thing. Like, don't pay attention to it." No. It's like this felt pretty significant, and stuff like that shouldn't break, especially on things like Binance. So, yeah, like I don't know, third cycle spider senses tingling. Any thoughts
I'm
on
actually
that?
surprised. Yeah, I'm actually surprised that CZ is not coming back, because very, very clearly that was massively mismanaged. I think I said it the last time. The more I sort of learn about it, the more that sort of solidifies. So I think that was just very, very poor. Not great. And it's in a way it's helping the likes of Hyperliquid, which trades really interesting as well, I think, at the moment, because you could really see if there's a lot of trading going on. Well, save these sort of severe liquidation cascades, but generally it's very good for the revenue. You've got sort of the token aligned with revenue perfectly, right? You can see that way even at times if there's a bit of a drop, you can see hype still going up, because obviously there's a lot of
Same mechanism.
yeah. So, and I think there you go. And I think from that perspective, it's still, I don't know. To me, it's still probably a buy even at these levels, because it's a truly innovative and well executed project. And I think more likely than not that they're being added to more and more wallets as well, which I think really helps, right? That sort of easy access to it. Whereas I think a lot of exchanges are still very, very clunky and difficult to use. Whereas you can just buy a 3x token or 3x exposure and you're done on, Phantom, on Rabi, or whatever wallet of your choice you're sort of using. And that's, I think that's simple enough to be attracting retail. You can buy stables directly on there. So
on-chain equities as well now.
Yeah.
So not the only people to do on-chain equities, but I think we're going to see more of that as well. And so I think refreshingly with Hyperliquid, not to just be the endless fucking hype fanboy, but pretty much the only project that hasn't been like max extracting. All they have done is give. They did a massive airdrop. They've basically pointed all the revenue fees to buybacks. It's like the team is, I guess, like making money, probably like market making themselves on the side and things, and they have other ways to make money. But like from a sort of token connected to a protocol standpoint, they've been the shining example of like how to do right by the holders, by the community, in a sense of like that's what it's kind of like holding a stock, where like if the company does well, generally the shareholders do well, not I hold this token and now the foundation is just going to dump on me for the next 4 years. And so yeah, viva la hype and equities.
On that note, Thomas, I think you have to leave us soon, so maybe we can close it on this super positive note about hype and how we should all be buying what conveniently Satiris is holding in his portfolio.
Yeah, definitely not. Don't buy at these levels.
Guys,
if it dips, I do want to have more probably. But
nice. We will check that out. Guys, let's close it here, and I'll stop the streaming on the different platforms, and then we can let you work.
Let's hope for one more last leg up though.
Oh, bye guys.
See you
guys. Good catch. Bye bye.
I don't even know how to. Okay, bye guys.
See ya.